everything. Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to a bunch of mid-video games. Mediocre, dare I say. Games that barely crossed the 6 out of 10 threshold for many out there, but for some of us, maybe they're the 7 out of 10s, they're the 8 out of 10s. Look, I'm not gonna sell you any game in this stack here next to me like it is the second coming of Jesus Christ. But what I will say is that many of these games are criminally underrated, criminally under-discussed, and I'm hoping today to do some games some justice. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Rebound. If you're new here, you like nostalgic or retrospective content, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. There is one game I knew I had to start off this list with because it is a game that I think about all the time on just how I feel it would do so well nowadays, but no one really talks about it, and that is Remember Me? Do you remember Me? Funny, because this is a whole game about being a memory hunter, and you're set in Neo Paris. The art direction for this game is so strong. Like, just everything about it to me is so visually striking, so appealing. They really did an excellent job capturing this high future vibe, which I think after seeing Blade Runner, you start to notice a lot of futuristic visuals borrow heavily from that. And it's like the godfather of sci-fi. So I get it, but this is a game that just feels like it stands out on its own. I love games about memories. You're remixing memories, trying to find out more about your past, but also one of the best features in this game that, again, I'm so surprised we don't see many other games doing. This game had a combo lab. You would literally string together insane moves to create your own combos. For many people, the fighting got very rinse and repeat and boring, but I don't know if I'm just like a world and lore junkie, but to me, the atmosphere, the music, the visuals, and then the ideas, like even if they weren't perfectly executed with, finding memories within the reels or the combo lab, I just thought it did so many distinct things. And that is the key to mediocre games for many of us, if you will. I think it's totally dead wrong to call Remember Me a mediocre game. But for a lot of people, they see a 7 out of 10 and go, nope, I'm good, because it's flawed. It's not good. But most times 7 out of 10s are in that pocket because they tried a lot of different things and they landed there because not all the execution was perfect. But for those of us who don't mind a 7 out of 10, like it's not perfect, but it's unique, that's where these games really sing for us. Nowadays, 7 out of 10 for a lot of reviews is the safe score. It's the game that doesn't really do anything too wrong. It passes all of the visual benchmarks. It passes all of the gameplay benchmarks. Like you can swing a sword, you can hold LT to block. Like it checks all the boxes on the list, but it doesn't really do anything distinct. It's just a functional game. Anyway, Remember Me, to me at least, is the perfect representation of a game that gets a 7 out of 10. People think it's awful, but it's actually more unique than many games coming out nowadays. Next up here, this is one that gets slammed all the time. I'm here to put up the sword and the shield once more for Final Fantasy 13. I don't care what anyone says, especially after playing through the entirety of 10-2, I really don't care what anyone has to say about this one. I absolutely adore the 13 trilogy, but I also think that 13 really isn't as bad as people make it out to be. Is it the perfect Final Fantasy? No. Is it my favorite Final Fantasy? No. I think 13-2 absolutely smokes 13 in every department. But do I think 13 is so heinous, such a crime to humanity, that you should outright skip it? No. Again, I'm a world junkie. The visuals can get me sometimes, although it's funny because many times I'm not persuaded by graphics. These are the first two examples where just the artistic direction grabs me so deeply. I think the pre-rendered cutscenes, which we cannot show you because Square Enix for some reason still copyright claims them. When we did our retrospective on 13, they took down our video 7 different times, fun fact. But I can just at least say the pre-rendered cutscenes have aged marvelously. The visuals in the world, especially on Series X, are incredible. This looks like a modern video game, but also I love the combat system here. It's the paradigm shift system. It's really built off the back of the dress sphere system from 10-2, but also some of the jobs that you see in 12, and it mixes them together where you're kind of shuffling a deck of cards as you're going through battle. Sometimes you need healers, sometimes you need to build up the stagger gauge, sometimes you need buffs and debuffs, and it really shakes up the traditional Final Fantasy formula. To me, this is pure Final Fantasy in a gameplay sense, and by that I mean Final Fantasy always tries to tackle new gameplay ideas every entry. No single entry unless it's a direct sequel, and it's funny because in the case of 10 to 10-2, they go back to the ATB system. But my point being is they're usually sticking with a gameplay style like 13, 13-2, and Lightning Returns all share similar ideas of like switching classes or jobs in the middle of battle. And so when I look at previous Final Fantasies, 13 mainly sticks out for me because not just its visuals, how well it's aged in that department, but also just like the gameplay systems. Again, they really evolved them and made them better in 13 too. But I just love the strategy behind the paradigm shift system. I think it is criminally overlooked. One though that many are willing to sing the praises of, that is less controversial on this list, is BioShock 2. However, this is one of those Arkham Origins moments, right? In the Arkham series, you have City, you have Asylum, you have Night, and then you have Origins. It's not the Rocksteady game, so WB pretends it doesn't exist. Some fans even pretend it doesn't exist, which is crazy to me. I love that game. BioShock is a similar situation. You have two Ken Levine games. You have BioShock 1 and Infinite, and those are my favorite games ever. But damn dog. BioShock 2 is a victim similarly to the way that Arkham Origins is a victim. It is a fantastic video game that just happens to be in the middle of like peak video games, like almost impossible to reach heights in Arkham Asylum and City, or BioShock 1 and Infinite. And you have here BioShock 2, which also did some very strange things. It's a bigger game than BioShock 1. BioShock 1 was very purposeful with its narrative. BioShock 2 allows you to meander a little bit. BioShock 2 throws in surprisingly great multiplayer. This was during the era where a lot of 360 and PS3 games, you know how nowadays you get like the early access paid editions, or you get the little microtransactions for cosmetics. This was a way for games to try and make money, is they'd force in a multiplayer mode. And you get these weird moments like BioShock 2, which says like, hey, we actually did a really great one. For me, just the setting of Rapture is so phenomenal that, yo, you want to throw another game in there? I'm down. Nowadays, I would expect something different from the new BioShock game, but at that time when BioShock was so new, I get why people are against it, but I think its narrative is underrated, its DLC especially underrated from what I have been told. I have actually admittedly not played Minerva's Den, but I've heard fantastic things about it. I think even the little camera system they have and studying these creatures within Rapture, I just have so many fond memories of when I rented this game from Blockbuster, and I haven't replayed it in a while because I've been staving myself off until we get the official BioShock release date, whatever Cloud Chamber's working on, or of course if Judas comes first. I want to replay all three of these games. I've replayed the first BioShock and Infinite so many times, but what's one more time, am I right? But BioShock 2, I haven't replayed that many times because it is like my least favorite out of the three, but it's still such a dang good game. Next up here is one that I don't know if many people call this mid, but I'm trying to right a personal wrong of mine throughout multiple videos. And in my Assassin's Creed Syndicate review, you can find on my Mr. Matty channel, I defined it as same old, same old. God, I wish it was like this still. You know, I was burnt out on Assassin's Creed, no doubt about it. But when I went back to Syndicate for our massive Assassin's Creed retrospective, I fell in love. I know the story isn't perfect. I don't really love the dual protagonists, but this setting, the rope launcher, the parkour, just really captured me. And this is a game that also had like a World War I segment as just side content. I was like, what's going on? This game is insane in its scope, but really it is that setting. It's something Assassin's Creed always nails. Even Shadows, even though I wasn't a big fan of Shadows, I think the visuals are so true to what I've seen of Japan. But Syndicate, it's moving train hideout. I mean, these elements of this game are just so cool, so good. It's no doubt a game I want to make a deep dive on at some point in the future, but this game I absolutely slept on for so long, and then playing the Jack the Ripper DLC, I mean, crazy. It's just a crazy game that I think released at the wrong time, where so many of us were tired of Assassin's Creed, because after this, Ubisoft took a year off, people were celebrating, they came back with new ideas for AC Origins, and that was an exciting time. I was for the change, and nowadays, it's so funny to see how they got more and more RPG-ified, and I just miss the days where it was a classic Assassin game. You always want what you can't have, I guess. Hey, speaking out of what I call the best 7 out of 10 games, this is what I call Sonic Frontiers. You may remember my retrospective that Sonic Frontiers to me is absolutely one of the best 7 out of 10 games I've played. I'm not afraid to admit it. I think a lot of Sonic games, in fact, kind of fit in that comfortable, lovely, very different 7 out of 10 pocket. There's nothing really quite like a Sonic game that takes itself incredibly seriously and has its heartwarming moments amidst all of the weirdness and jank. Yeah, there are floating rails in Sonic Frontiers. Yeah, it makes really no sense, but do I have fun running around this obstacle course? Absolutely. Do I love collecting things in this world? Absolutely. Do I love the music and just vibing out in this world? Absolutely. Do I love the heartfelt story moments, even if the story is sometimes just completely insane or really not cohesive? 100%. I just think this game is such a good time, and it feels like the formula for the future of Sonic, of this kind of free-form exploration and approach to gameplay. Especially when they did the DLC for Frontiers, the Final Horizons DLC, and they really just turned up the difficulty. They said, oh, you thought this combat was easy, watch this. Oh, you thought this platforming was easy, watch this. Maybe almost frustratingly so. I do think the final boss, I won't spoil it, was not great, but being able to play as like Amy and Knuckles and Tails, I was like, yo, this is like Sonic Adventure open world vibe. So I'm very excited for whatever they follow up Sonic Frontiers with. Okay, outside of one plot twist, Sly, Thieves in Time, it's time to put respect on this game. For me, my personal least favorite entry in the Sly Cooper franchise, as I talked about in our Sly 3 retrospective, is Sly 3. I think it's a game that, funny enough, lacks a lot of purpose, in my opinion. I don't find its story as captivating as 1 or 2's. And I know 1 story is pretty thin, so that probably says a lot to you. And that's also probably shocking because Sly Thieves in Time does have one of the most controversial story elements in the entire series. I'm not a huge defender of that aspect. I just think it's easy to overlook when it does so much else right. When you pass off a game to another developer, you're Sucker Punch, you've made 3 Sly Cooper games, you've had this vision to hand it over to Sanzaru, and they make something that is so true to the Sly Cooper name in visuals, I think in just the way they explore the Thievius Raccoonus, all these Coopers that you've seen throughout Sly 1 when the game was first introduced have become playable characters. Like, it just felt like a complete expression of all of the foundational work that went into the Sly Cooper franchise. Being able to play as like Tennessee Kid Cooper, I loved that. These areas being far more open yet true to what Sly Cooper was. That's like unheard of nowadays. Anytime you hear like, hey, this has been passed off to a new developer, it's always a new creative vision. It's totally different from the previous stuff in the series. But Sly 4 manages to retain so much of what made it special. And because you have like these new rotating playable characters for every chapter, it also is like a new way to explore the world. Like, there's the Cooper that I forget his name off the top of my head, but it's like Sir Lancelot Cooper or whatever. And he uses his lance to like launch himself up to higher areas. Like, I just thought that was cool. The mini games in this game I thought were really fun. The training montages were also really fun. I know it's not perfect on the story front, but I think it does so much so well. Like, the QTEs are back for like the dancing games. Like, it just pays so much respect to old Sly Cooper. And I think so many people just hyper fixate on this one moment that I know is jarring, I know isn't consistent, but I think outside of that, everything around this game is so Sly Cooper. I don't get why people hate it. This is one I was in unison about for people disliking until I replayed it about 4 years ago. I know Dragon Age is a bit of a tainted franchise nowadays, but Dragon Age 2 is often symbolized as the game in the franchise that really sent things off the rails. That lack of cohesion, that lack of a consistent vision for the franchise became the vision of the franchise. You get what I mean? You look at Origins and you think we're going in one direction, 2 takes us in another. Inquisition tries to do both things, and I don't even want to get into Valguard. So Dragon Age 2 to a lot of people is this black sheep. But when I went back and played it, the amount of things I really liked about it, despite changes that I don't agree with at all from BioWare, was a pretty high amount. I kind of enjoyed the action combat. It's not what I want. I preferred Origins, but I had a good time with it. Playing as a mage was really easy. I kind of liked the condensed version of Kirkwall. It was very much uninspiring compared to Skyrim, which was just releasing around that time. So yeah, Dragon Age 2 looked very low budget, but looking at it away from that zeitgeist and more just on a game on its own, I really enjoyed just going around Kirkwall and learning about all these different pockets of life, all these different factions like the Qunari who are just in wait, this brewing war in the background, like a powder keg about to blow. I think it has the series' best villain. No, I'm not talking about Corypheus, by the way. I'll let you discover that for yourself. But Dragon Age 2 has a lot of great things. It does introduce a voice protagonist. Not crazy about that. It does give you the emoticon wheel for dialogue, which tells you like, hey, you're going to be happy when you say this. And a lot of times it's inaccurate, a mistake that Veilguard would go on to make. but I think there's a lot of choice in this game. The companions are really solid. Like it's not my favorite BioWare game. I can name you like 5 different ones that are way better than 2, but I think 2 is worth a playthrough. Like it is actually a good time. And I think if you've been away from all that noise long enough and all you've heard is it's a bad game, I wouldn't say it falls into that BioShock 2 pocket or anything like that, but I do think it is a much better game than people give it credit for. This game got awful reviews. Anytime I see this Atlas logo though, I'm all over it. We've got Operation Darkness, a rare, exclusive Xbox 360 JRPG. But this game is basically if you took like the idea of Fire Emblem gameplay, like permadeath, tactics, building relationships with your party members, except you set it during World War II and there's werewolves and vampires and it's really unbalanced and the camera's awful. You get Operation Darkness. As you can see in this video, anything that goes for atmosphere or it's really unique, trying to do something different, I am a little bit easier on. It doesn't mean, again, I think a good example would be like Ray Nodis when I reviewed it. Tried to do a lot of different things, but it just felt awful, so I didn't like that game at all. But in games like Operation Darkness, they just hit enough things right where yeah, you're on the edge of your seat worried about how much progress you're going to lose and enemies will slap you upside the head. I do think this is a game that will just one day randomly get re-released and it'll be rebalanced and all that stuff. But, you know, for as it stands now, it is a very expensive 360 game, like probably the most expensive 360 game I have in my collection. So I don't know if I'd say go buy for that price, but if you do have an alternative way to play it and you can get it on the cheap or on the low, not a bad time. You know, it's just a little janky. Well, what's a JRPG jank conversation without Dirge of Cerberus? This is also considered a very mid video game by many. I get it. It's not a great third-person shooter. It's not a great Final Fantasy game. It's not really even a great Vincent game. It just kind of exists. But as a 2000s kid, it's a great early 2000s game. And I just kind of like that they decided to make this really cool character in Vincent. This kind of Shadow the Hedgehog moment. You know, this was what a lot of franchises were pursuing. Give Sonic a gun. They make Shadow the Hedgehog, my favorite character in the franchise. They give him his own game where he can like use guns. This game, Dirge of Cerberus, reminded me a lot of Shadow the Hedgehog, even if I played Dirge of Cerberus super late. I couldn't tell you a thing about the story. Couldn't tell you a thing I really loved about the gameplay, but I just kind of liked being in this world, watching Vincent operate. And I hope it's a game that does get touched up in the kind of Crisis Core reunion way that Square kind of slightly subtly remade Crisis Core and just made it way better on the gameplay front in so many ways. I would love to see Dirge of Cerberus get that same treatment, especially with where Remake and Rebirth are going. Come on, it just seems like it's due. Of course, we got to end this on Marvel like it seems like we always do, whether it's like delisted games or in this case, there's a lot of mid-Marvel games, but I got 3 in 1 for you here. We've got Spider-Man Web of Shadows, we have Deadpool, and we have Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects. Okay, let's start off with Web of Shadows. We've talked about this one pretty extensively in the past, so I'll keep it brief. It is an awful open world Spider-Man game. The combat is super repetitive. I don't care what anyone says. At the same time, though, the ability to make choices and just see how things play out. Spider-Man can cheat on Mary Jane as a choice. It's ridiculous, but it's awesome. You can kill Luke Cage. You can kill Wolverine. It's ridiculous. The evil choices in this game are just so unhinged. It's unbelievable that it ever got greenlit. I think you can get around some of the combat woes, but you're just always zip kicking. But still, I just think the choices you can make is worth the ride alone. When it comes to Deadpool, no game in the superhero genre just lets you curse as much as this one does, has as many distinct, funny, narrative, fourth wall breaking moments as this one. Of course, it's a Deadpool game, but you can slap people awake. There's moments where they say like, oh, we cut the budget in this area, and they literally do that. Like you actually see like visuals that would represent a cut budget. They said they put a sewer section in the game because they were cutting budget. It just leans so well into that humor that yes, it's making excuses for the kind of mid game it is, but it's very smart game design. I'm like, this is hilarious. This is still kind of fun to play. They give you ridiculous weapons. It's really gory. It's really enjoyable. And it's like just a good 6-hour romp. Like you're in and out and you're done with it. But this one I remember playing on the PSP. Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects. This is a game that has environmental destruction and just crazy combat in a way that I think a lot of people just forget this game existed. It's got a really, really weird roster of characters. So you'll hear familiar names in this game like Captain America, Daredevil's in the game. You have Doctor Doom, Spider-Man's here. You hear that and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm totally down for a 3D fighting game like that. But then you hear characters like Fault Zone, Hazmat, Johnny Ohm. You have Brigade here, Paragon, Wink. I'm just like, who? What are you talking about? Some of these are exclusive to the PSP version, but I just thought this game, I was so addicted to it as a kid. And when I fired it back up, it's still just like this janky 3D arena fighter game with Marvel characters, but because of like the environmental destruction, the weapons, everything's kind of just sandboxy, it's still such a fun time. So I really enjoy it a lot. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, these are a bunch of mid to mediocre games I still care about, I still love. I'd love to hear from you because for me, I'm a fan out of the weak 7 out of 10 experience, I guess, because I think, again, these are games that are trying different things, and if you can look past certain elements of them, you're likely going to find some gold there. So let me know what you think down below of these mid games, if you can define them as such, and I'd love to hear from you what your mid games are. Other than that, I'll catch all of you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.